Do you remember when you saw the source on the newsstand, what issue that was or who was on the cover of that one?
Uh, don't hold me to it, but the first issue I was in was KRS-One. So it was something before that. So it was either Malcolm X on the cover or it was some kind of special might have been the no, that came after, I think. If it wasn't Malcolm X, it was some special celebratory cover that they want. I think the Muslim issue, I think by then I was already in the
Oh,
magazine,
you're
but it
talking
was
about the
something
one
around that
with
time.
Big Daddy Kane, Paris, and Lakim Shabazz?
Yeah, that might be after me or it might be an issue before me, but it was around, was one of those.
And then the KRS-One, you're talking about when he had the Malcolm X like beanie.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was September 1990. That's the first issue I was in. So
Okay.
I did the artwork in August and then it came out September.
So when you were telling the source how it was going to go with your art and you were going to
Mhm.
own it and you were going to retain the rights and all these different things, did they question it? Did you get any pushback or were they like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Well, like I said, I didn't just tell them. I had my normal invoices, and they weren't gonna get my artwork if they didn't sign it. So I felt like not that I had the upper hand, but I knew what the hell I was doing. I had been freelancing for 3 years, and that was the routine that other magazines that were established were doing, and I was just gonna hold them to it. So no, there was no argument. Once I gave them the paperwork, they read it and they asked questions for what is first Northern reproduction rights, and artwork has to be returned within 90 days, and if you don't, there's a kill fee, and you got to pay me that. All of that was in the invoice that they had to sign in order to get my artwork. So
And and through firsthand experience and the problems other people had over the years, you did it for almost 17 years, but let's just say the first 5 or 10 years, did you ever have problems getting paid from the source or was it just smooth?
no, no, absolutely none. I mean, it was a big major $50 because like the first year, that's all I was getting. $50 for drawing. But I wasn't doing it for the money in my pockets. I wasn't, first of all, it was hip hop. They didn't have to explain nothing to me. They didn't have to tell me who the people were. Like I said, we're doing Eazy-E. That's all they told me. I knew the the way he thought then, what his response would be. So I did it for the fact that here I am, I can actually draw shit that I love, and don't have to think about it because I'm living it. You don't got to explain nothing to me because I know already. I have my viewpoint. I grew up with some of these folks, not literally, but I grew up in that world and that mentality. So for me, they didn't know it at the time. I was loving the fact that I was getting to draw people that I knew because I was drawing stuff for other magazines. By that point, I had started doing stuff for Playgirl, a monthly drawing in there. So I was drawing more established white Hollywood actors and actresses. But now I'm drawing hip hop figures. So for me, it was cool. It was good when I got a call. Okay, now I can put this down and listen to hip hop while I'm drawing.
So even at this time, were you the source is obviously just an upstart magazine. It's not what
Mhm.
became later this big institution. Did you get were you getting commensurate feedback? Like was the source you get less attention from stuff you did in the source, or was it right out the gate, everybody was hitting you up like, wow, what is this?
Well, you know me, so you will understand what I'm about to say. I didn't really care. I was just drawing what I got to love. And then when they had events and stuff, I wasn't going because for me, it was just about letting the artwork speak for itself. I didn't need anybody to know what I looked like. I didn't need to be seen. So I didn't really care. It wasn't until probably like 5, 6 months in, maybe a little bit more, where I would come up and Reggie Dennis would be like, the Mumba from X Clan. He saw the drawing. He's not happy with you. He wants to talk to you. When I started getting stuff like that, I was like, all right, people are seeing this on a whole different level than what I was, how I view things. People are going towards negativity instead of humor. because when he saw the drawing, he was mad that I drew his like beads covering his mouth. You know, my sense of humor, I'm saying you wear a lot of beads. The way he viewed it was, I'm trying to tell him to shut up. So that started to be the blueprint of what I was saying and how people interpreted what I was saying.
And was that the first time that that had happened with your art
No, I
professionally?
mean, professionally, yes.
Right.
Because when I was working for other magazines, um, art director had an exact of who they wanted me to draw and what they wanted the person to be doing. With the source, I had the liberty, well, somewhat liberty, of putting more of my personality and my sense of humor into the drawing. It was learning how to get what I wanted at the source. By that I mean I would come in with two sketches. In the beginning, I would just come in with what I thought was funny and let them pick. And they wouldn't always pick the one that I thought was funniest. So I got to the point where the second one was on point, but it wasn't as funny as that first. So I knew what I was going home drawing because I plotted out in my head. And I knew which one would be stronger. I didn't always get the final choice. Like with the one of the hardest battles would be with Carlito. Carlito, I was doing Nate Dogg illustration, and he just didn't. I don't think. I mean, Carlito definitely had a great sense of humor because I did a lot of positive ones through his while he was on, while his was his reign. But the original idea I had with him was three different faces of Nate Dogg. And it was Nate Dogg happy, Nate Dogg mad, Nate Dogg sad. And it was just gonna be the same face. And I just knew in my brain that that shit was funny. If somebody saw it, and it didn't click with him. So I wound up having to draw Nate Dogg at a dog show. And I drew him and looking like a dog. And it was, yeah, I hated that one. But years later, I was able to use that same Nate Dogg idea when I think when his album came out, and people view that one as a classic. So I always trust my judgment. I've been doing this. I know what's going to be funny.
Okay. And then what did when Lumumbo Professor X from X Clan did have an issue with it, did
Mhm.
it given that hip hop obviously is street centered culture, did you feel like, oh man, this is more serious than I realized? Did you feel like, man, I got to think about stuff a little differently? Or did you just be like, man, I don't care what these dudes are saying. I'm going to do what I want to do?
Well, a little bit of both. I cared, and I was going to do what I was going to do as long as I was allowed to in the source. If I wasn't, then I was going to be gone. But add this to it. I was 25 at the time. Um, Born and raised in Brooklyn, still in Brooklyn. I would see X Clan members in my neighborhood just walking around, get on the same train. And I'm from the brain frame of I don't like to be surprised. If you got a beef with me, I want to confront it, talk about it, as opposed to you finding out who I am and I get jumped. So when I went there and Reggie told me he had a beef, I was like, give him my number. So I get home and I get a call from the number. Uh, He's like, what did he say to me? He's like, I don't think you like me. I'm calling to find out what's going on. And I just broke it down to him and I was like, listen, I did the drawing because you wear a lot of beads. That's what the joke was. And he got quiet on the other end. And then he started laughing. And me and him were cool from that point on until he passed. All right. So that's the sweet Disney version of that story. As I'm putting together and compiling the last word book, which I'm still working on, I spoke to Paradise and Brother Jay. And Paradise is like, yo, we was coming to find you. You saw, so I'm glad I did and do how I did back then because they would have found me because I was in the neighborhood. At some point they'd have figured out who I was, and I wasn't necessarily trying to hide because I had to change up my flow. But it started with them beefing. Then I think the next one beefing was probably DJ Quik when I drew him in the barber salon, oh, the beauty salon, with his hair permed, and James Brown was sitting next to him. Um, but that's where I actually started to learn that things were changing a little bit. So there was him beefing about that, people passing word to me telling me that DJ Quik said never to come to California. Never heard that straight from him, so never knew if that was just people talking shit or if that was the truth. But that was what the tone was. And then like 3, 4 days later, he's on Yo MTV Raps, and it's just T Money and Dr. Dre. And Dr. Dre pulls out the issue, folds the page, and is waving the drawing of him and the beauty salon at the screen. And the dudes that he's with said, yo, that just means you made it. That just means so they said that on air. And it started to be like if you were drawn in the last word, it meant that you were made it. It was a sign of respect. It was that type of thing. Of course, I still had people who was pissed, depending on what I drew, though. But that's where I kind of felt a change, even though I wasn't looking for one.
Well, I know I'd been told and seen and didn't some of the artists like Heavy D and for example, didn't he say like he'd always look at that first? Like,
Well, that's the first time I heard that. It was like the 100th issue anniversary, and they had a big ceremony, and I was there. Normally I wouldn't go, but I went. And Heavy D comes up on the screen because they had a couple of people just talking about congrats and celebrating. And Heavy D looked at the screen. He's like, the first thing I do when I pick up an issue is I turn to the back page and look at the artwork. And that's when I everything else started to clicking. I was like, all right, so this is a little different than what I was thinking. And because Heavy D was an MC that I respected and liked and whatever. So that definitely felt good. It wasn't what I was looking for, but when I got it, it felt good. So I knew I was doing something right and I wasn't gonna change.
so what because over the years and I met you obviously later than all the stuff we're talking about, but
Mhm.
since so much of hip hop culture stuff is so much about look at me, look at me, look at me, and I'm so great. What is it about your personality, your character, how you grew up, how you were raised that you were not seeking this attention or this notoriety or the limelight?
Well, first of all, like I said, as a shy kid, then the youngest of four. Then, if you got a little cocky, you got beat up by your older brothers and sisters to keep you in line. So that was part of the whole flavor. So I also knew I have a addictive personality. So I smoke any weed, I'm going full blast. So I had never smoked weed. I'd be in the car with Boo-Yaa and X Clan, and they'd pass it around, and uh, it wasn't my thing. Never had been drunk because I like to be in control of myself at all times. But it was also when I started feeling that I'd be at certain places and the people were like, oh, your work is wonderful. You're great. You're this and that. Get your head swelled up a little. So I was like, I don't need that. Give me, if I'm at a room and there's 100 people and I get two people telling me they love my shit, that's enough for me. I don't need the other 98. So my whole thing was, there's no need for me to go. It ain't gonna give me nothing. As long as they appreciate my art. And that's kind of like how I kept it until nowadays, where to promote and get my stuff out like how I want to, I've had to put the face out there. And then also teaching. I do not like standing in front of a room when people are talking, but in order to do what I do, you got to eat that and make it work. So there's times I can switch it on and off, but I still prefer to just lay in the cut and do whatever. Um, except, I've done a lot of Black comic book conventions and festivals. So when people meet me unexpectedly, uh, I love the reaction. That the fact that you're here, I've never met you, never seen you. And yeah, this is me. I love that reaction. That happened when I did Florida Comic Con like 2 years ago. Dude was like, I was walking around just hoping I would see some hip hop, and then it's you. And he came back the next day with like 50 issues of the source and asked me if I could sign them. So, so the reactions like that I enjoy because being older, have better control of my brain and ego and all those other things. So I just still don't like too much of it. Um, but if we're talking about art and talking about hip hop in the midst of it, then I'm cool. I can definitely flow with it.